You're watching Northern Crimes.
On a cold January evening in 1970, a 17-year-old girl walked alone across a hospital parking lot in Olympia, Washington. The yellow interior light of her station wagon flickered on, and moments later, Patricia Garrison collapsed beside it, bleeding from nearly 20 stab wounds. A hospital employee found her barely conscious. Before slipping into shock, Patricia uttered a few cryptic words. She suggested she wasn't supposed to say who had driven her there. She held on for 32 hours before succumbing to her injuries. Her lungs had been punctured. One wound pierced her skull. On the front seat of her car lay a bloodied knife, believed to be the murder weapon, surrounded by smears that told only part of the story. This brutal attack stunned Olympia, but it wasn't an isolated event. Over the next few years, the quiet capital and surrounding Thurston County would become the backdrop for a series of killings and disappearances that shook the community and left investigators chasing shadows. This is Northern Crimes. 4 years after Patricia Garrison's murder, another young life disappeared, this time without a sound. On May 25th, 1974, 14-year-old Brenda Joy Baker vanished while hitchhiking near Puyallup, Washington. It was a warm spring day, and Brenda had told friends she planned to meet a soldier stationed at Fort Lewis. In the 1970s, hitchhiking was common among teens, seen more as a rite of passage than a risk. Brenda was one of 7 children and had a history of running away, but this time felt different. She hadn't packed a bag or taken any money. When she didn't come home for the evening, her parents grew alarmed. They filed a missing person report before the day was over. For weeks, the silence deepened. Then, on June 17, 1974, 3 hikers wandering the edge of Miller Sylvania State Park stumbled across something terrible. Near a clearing, partially hidden beneath 2 logs and a scattering of brush, lay the decomposing remains of a young girl. The scene was bleak. From the waist up, the body had nearly disintegrated. Time, heat, and the elements had erased her features. Only through dental records could authorities confirm it was Brenda. The medical examiner estimated she'd been dead for nearly a month, likely killed not long after she disappeared. The cause was listed as probable strangulation or knife wounds, but the advanced decomposition left little certainty. Her death, it turned out, wasn't the only one. Just months earlier, in November 1973, 14-year-old Katherine Devine had also vanished while hitchhiking, this time near Olympia. Her body was discovered in Capitol State Forest 11 days later. Her throat had been slashed, her clothing torn open, the remote woods a silent witness to another act of violence. 2 teenage girls, both hitchhiking alone, both found dead in wooded areas of Thurston County, both left behind barely a trace of their final hours. The similarities were chilling, and for investigators, it was no longer possible to view these cases in isolation. As detectives worked to piece together what had happened to Katherine Devine and Brenda Baker, unsettling connections began to surface. Both girls were young, just 14. Both were last seen hitchhiking near Olympia, and both were found murdered in remote forested areas of Thurston County, left exposed to the elements and the passing of time. The parallels were striking, and then came something far stranger. An anonymous caller phoned the Thurston County Sheriff's Department in the months following the murders. He claimed that in late November 1973, around the time Katherine Devine went missing, he'd been grouse hunting deep in the woods when he stumbled upon a shack. Inside, he saw a man with two girls, both around 12 to 14 years old. The caller said he sensed something was wrong, but left without intervening. When he later returned to the area in January, the shack had been abandoned. What remained, however, was grim. The carcasses of 6 dogs and 1 cat, skinned and stripped of their bones, littered the surrounding area. The bizarre scene raised questions about what had really taken place there. In early June 1974, the man claimed to have returned again and saw the same man near the shack. This time, when he returned with a friend on June 20, they were allegedly shot at. The timeline echoed the disappearances of Katherine and Brenda. While authorities couldn't verify all the details, the reports painted a disturbing picture: a remote hideout, repeated sightings, and potential threats to others who got too close. Additional witness reports added weight to the growing fear. A Seattle man named Bill Sullivan told investigators he'd seen a girl matching Brenda Baker's description hitchhiking near the Scott Lake interchange on I-5 in May 1974. He recalled her getting into an older, light-colored panel truck driven by a bearded man. The detail was chilling and specific. Despite these leads, investigators hit a familiar wall. Without hard evidence, no names, no vehicle plates, no physical proof, they couldn't identify a suspect. But the pattern was there: 2 girls gone, 2 bodies in the woods, eyewitnesses pointing to a danger lurking just beneath the surface, and it wasn't over. As the investigations into Katherine Devine and Brenda Baker's murders dragged on, another name began to cast a long and chilling shadow across the Pacific Northwest: Ted Bundy. By the mid-1970s, Bundy had become one of North America's most feared serial killers. His trail of terror stretched along multiple states, including Washington, where he admitted to killing at least 11 women. His victims were often young, white women with long brown hair parted down the middle, and his method was disturbingly calculated, luring them in with charm or fake injuries before attacking. The timeline of Bundy's known crimes overlapped with the murders in Thurston County. In May 1974, the month Brenda Baker vanished, Bundy was living in Seattle at the Rogers rooming house and working for the Department of Emergency Services in Olympia. That put him less than 2 hours away from both the place Brenda was last seen and the wooded park where her body was found. And the similarities didn't end there. Brenda and Katherine matched Bundy's victim profile: hitchhiking alone, found in forested areas, and killed within his active timeline. The pieces seemed to fit. For years, many believed Bundy was the prime suspect. Even Bill Devine, Katherine's father, came to believe it.
I needed to think it was somebody I could blame.
But behind the circumstantial similarities, doubts remained. Bundy had never confessed to either murder, and while he later claimed to have committed crimes too brutal to admit, no forensic evidence ever tied him to Brenda or Katherine. In the absence of clear answers, the myth of Bundy loomed large. His name became a convenient placeholder, a dark figure to attach to the unknown. But in time, the truth would take a much different shape. In 2001, with forensic DNA analysis now advanced enough to re-examine old evidence, investigators sent samples from the Katherine Devine case to the Washington State Patrol Crime Laboratory. The results were immediate and shocking. The DNA didn't match Ted Bundy. Instead, it pointed to William Cosden Jr., a man that had been in the case file from the very beginning. Cosden wasn't a stranger to law enforcement. In fact, he'd been an early suspect back in 1973. He worked at the Restover truck stop, a family business near where Katherine was last seen. Witnesses had reported seeing blood on his clothing and in his truck on the night Katherine disappeared. And just hours later, that same truck mysteriously caught fire and burned. Yet with no hard evidence, investigators couldn't make the case. The blood and hair samples collected in 1973 were inconclusive. Without a confession or stronger physical evidence, the case stalled. In 1986, deputies returned and collected updated samples of Cosden's blood, hair, and saliva. But it wasn't until 15 years later, using modern DNA technology, that those samples finally connected him to the crime scene. When confronted, Cosden initially denied knowing Katherine Devine. Later, he admitted to having sex with her, but insisted he hadn't killed her. On March 7, 2002, the Thurston County Sheriff's Office announced that DNA evidence had ruled out Ted Bundy and identified William Cosden Jr. as the man responsible for Katherine Devine's murder. He was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, nearly 30 years after the crime. For investigators, it was the moment they'd waited decades to see. For the Devine family, it was the beginning of long-delayed justice. On July 29, 2002, nearly 29 years after Katherine Devine's murder, a jury in Thurston County Superior Court delivered its verdict: guilty. William Cosden Jr. was convicted of first-degree murder. Judge Daniel Burschauer sentenced him to life in prison, calling him a danger to society who should never be released. For the Devine family, the moment brought both grief and relief. Nearly 3 decades of unanswered questions had finally led to justice.
For us, it's been 28 years of thoughts and thoughts and thoughts. It's finished. There's a justice system, and it works.
But while Katherine's killer was finally behind bars, the case of Brenda Joy Baker remained unresolved, and the similarities between the two murders raised an uncomfortable question: was Cosden responsible for both? Cosden's conviction offered long-awaited answers, but it also raised new and troubling questions. The similarities between Devine's case and that of Brenda Baker were hard to ignore. Both victims, teenage girls, both had last been seen hitchhiking alone, both were found dead in wooded areas of Thurston County, and both had connections to the Restover truck stop where Cosden had worked. It seemed more than a coincidence. Some investigators believe that Cosden, not Bundy, was responsible for Brenda's murder as well. The proximity of the crime scenes to Cosden's family businesses only deepened suspicions. But there was one problem: evidence. Brenda's body had been exposed to the elements for over a month before it was found. The advanced decomposition made it impossible to collect viable DNA. Unlike Katherine's case, there was no forensic trail, only circumstantial links and fading memories. Cosden was never charged in Brenda's case, and without new leads, her murder remained stuck in limbo, too cold to solve, too close to forget. Her parents never got answers. Her father died in 1979. Her mother passed away in 1989, just days before Ted Bundy was executed in Florida. Brenda's case became a symbol of how time and silence can erase even the strongest suspicions. In June 2024, the Thurston County Sheriff's Office launched a new cold case and missing persons unit. Led by Detective George Opplinger and Special Deputy Jim Lindsay, the two-person team is focused solely on solving the county's long-standing mysteries. The unit was made possible by a voter-approved public safety tax, giving investigators the resources to re-examine long-forgotten evidence. As of 2024, there are 30 active missing persons cases in Thurston County. 8 sets of unidentified remains found between 1981 and 2018 still await names. One of those cases is Patricia Garrison, murdered in 1970, her killer still unknown. But with new forensic tools, especially genetic genealogy, there's renewed hope that some answers may finally emerge. The murders that shook Olympia in the 1970s left more than grief in their wake. They reshaped a community. What had once felt like a quiet, safe corner of the Pacific Northwest was now a place where parents locked their doors earlier, where young women thought twice before hitchhiking, and where the woods, so familiar and serene, suddenly felt darker. For investigators, the memories remain vivid. Patricia Garrison's body beside her car, Katherine Devine in Capitol State Forest, Brenda Baker beneath a tangle of brush in Miller, Sylvania. William Cosden's conviction brought justice for one family, but it left others with questions that still haven't been answered. Was Cosden hiding more than one victim? What really happened to Brenda Joy Baker? And who stabbed Patricia Garrison on that cold January night? These cases stand as unresolved chapters, lives cut short, families left waiting, and communities left marked by unanswered questions. But they also reflect something else, the persistence of those who refuse to forget, the power of forensic science, and the belief that even in the darkest shadows, truth can still emerge. In Olympia and across the country, cold cases grow colder every year, but they're never truly forgotten, and sometimes, even decades later, justice has a way of catching up.